Coming down the stairs, I heard a lot of laughter in the living room. My daughter-in-law was showing my house to a buyer. "This house could hold mummies," they laughed. When I walked in, she confronted me. "You are already going to a nursing home. You do not run anything." I just replied, "You are going to rot in jail." The living room froze. "I am glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you are watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Evelyn Parker, and at 63 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in October when I heard the laughter. Not the warm, family kind of laughter that used to fill this house when my late husband Thomas was alive, but something sharper, colder, something that made my stomach twist as I slowly descended the stairs, gripping the banister with hands that suddenly felt older than their years. The voices were coming from my living room. My living room, in my house where I had raised my son Michael and created 30 years of memories. As I reached the bottom step, I could make out distinct voices through the archway. This house could hold mummies. The laughter that followed made my blood run cold. I stepped into the doorway and froze. There was my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning light, gesturing dramatically at my vintage wallpaper, to a middle-aged couple I had never seen before. The woman was taking notes on her phone, while the man measured the windows with his eyes, like he was already planning renovations. "The bones are good," Vanessa was saying, running her manicured finger along my antique mantelpiece like she owned it. "You could completely modernize this place. Tear down that wall, open up the kitchen, maybe add a master suite upstairs." My throat went dry. They were talking about my home like it was already theirs. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. All three heads turned toward me. The couple looked embarrassed, shifting uncomfortably. But Vanessa's face did not show even a flicker of shame. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and gave me that smile I had learned to fear over the past 3 years since she married my son. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I did not expect you to be up so early. This is my house," I said, finding my voice. "What are these people doing here?" The man cleared his throat. "We are the Carters. We were told this property was for sale." My legs nearly gave out. "For sale?" Vanessa stepped between me and the couple, her smile never wavering. "I am so sorry," she said to them, lowering her voice just enough that I had to strain to hear. "She gets confused sometimes. The family is handling all the arrangements." The humiliation hit me like a physical blow. She was talking about me like I was not even there, like I was some senile old woman who did not understand what was happening in her own home. "I am not confused," I said, my voice getting stronger. "This is my house, and I did not put it up for sale." Vanessa's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something ugly flash in her green eyes. Then she was all sympathy again, turning back to the Carters. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation another time," she suggested, "when things are more settled." As the couple gathered their things and headed for the door, I heard Melissa Carter whisper to her husband, "Daniel, poor thing. It is so sad when they lose their grip on reality." The front door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Vanessa turned to face me, and now there was no pretense of kindness in her expression. "Sit down, Evelyn," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. In my own living room, I shot back, but I was shaking now. The full reality of what had just happened was starting to sink in. "You are already going to a nursing home," Vanessa said, matter-of-factly, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her designer blouse. "You do not run anything anymore. Michael and I are making the decisions now." The words hit me like ice water. A nursing home. When had this been decided? How had this been decided without me? Where is my son? I demanded. At work, where responsible adults go during the day, Vanessa replied. Do not worry, he knows all about this. He signed the paperwork yesterday. I felt the room start to spin. Michael had signed paperwork. My own son had agreed to sell my house and put me in a nursing home without even discussing it with me. You cannot do this, I whispered. Vanessa pulled out her phone and began typing, not even bothering to look at me. Actually, we can. You see, Michael has power of attorney now. I helped him understand that you are not capable of making these kinds of decisions anymore. Power of attorney. The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. When had my son gotten power of attorney? When had I supposedly become incompetent? The nursing home is very nice, Vanessa continued conversationally, still focused on her phone. Maplewood residents, I picked it out myself. They have activities and everything. Bingo on Wednesdays, Maplewood residents. I knew that place. It was the cheapest facility in town, the one where people went to be forgotten. The one where my neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, had died last year after her family dumped her there. I am not going anywhere, I said, surprised by the steel that had crept into my voice. For the first time since the Carters left, Vanessa looked directly at me. Really, she said, looking at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood turn to ice. She was not just planning to get rid of me. She was enjoying it. Oh, but you are, she said softly. The papers are already signed. Your room is already reserved. The moving truck comes next week. That was when the rage hit me. Pure, white-hot fury that burned away the shock, the fear, and the confusion. This woman, this stranger who had married my son 3 years ago, thought she could just erase me. Thought she could take my life, my home, my dignity, and package it all up with a neat little bow. I looked at her standing in my living room in the house where I had nursed my husband Thomas through his final illness, where I had celebrated my son Michael's graduation, where I had planned to live out my remaining years in peace. And I smiled. You know what, Vanessa? I said, my voice perfectly calm now. You are going to rot in jail. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor my husband had installed with his own hands 40 years ago. Her face went completely white. What did you say? You heard me? I was still smiling, and I could see it was unnerving her. Good. Let her be unnerved. Let her wonder what I knew. Because the truth was, I knew a lot more than she realized. A lot more than anyone realized. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her standing there in shock. Behind me, I heard her scrambling to pick up her phone, her breathing quick and shallow. Evelyn, she called after me. What do you mean by that? Evelyn? But I did not answer. I had phone calls to make and plans to set in motion. Vanessa thought she was so clever, but she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated me completely, and now she was about to learn exactly what that mistake would cost her. The sound of Vanessa's heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floors followed me into the kitchen, but I did not turn around. I needed a moment to collect myself, to process what had just happened, and figure out my next move. 3 months. That was how long this had been building, and I had been too blind to see it. It started small, like these things always do. Vanessa suggesting that I looked tired, that maybe I should rest more. Michael mentioning that he worried about me living alone in such a big house. Little comments about my forgetfulness, my confusion, my declining health. Except I was not forgetful. I was not confused, and my health was fine. Evelyn, we need to talk. Vanessa's voice was sharp now, the fake sweetness completely gone. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot I had made earlier, my hand steady despite the storm raging inside me. There's nothing to talk about, dear, You have made your intentions perfectly clear. Look, I know you are upset, but this is for your own good. She was trying to regain control to sound reasonable. Michael and I have been worried about you for months. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter that had been my command center for decades. Worried about what exactly, your episodes? Vanessa said, perching on the edge of one of my kitchen chairs like she was afraid to fully commit to sitting down. The confusion, the forgetfulness. Last week you left the stove on all night. No, I did not. Yes, you did. I came over that morning and found it still burning. You could have burned the house down. I stared at her, and pieces of a puzzle I had not even realized existed began clicking into place. You were here that morning when I was not home. I was at my doctor's appointment. Well, yes, and somehow you found the stove on in an empty house. I set my coffee cup down carefully. How interesting. A flush crept up Vanessa's neck, but she pushed forward. And what about the bills? You forgot to pay the electric bill last month and your phone bill. Michael had to take care of everything. I have never missed a bill payment in 40 years. You are getting older, Evelyn. These things happen, but they did not happen. Not to me. I had always been meticulous about my bills, my schedule, my responsibilities. It was how I had managed to keep this house running after Thomas died. How I had built a comfortable nest egg for my retirement. Where is the paperwork? I asked suddenly. What paperwork? The power of attorney documents? I want to see what I supposedly signed. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Michael has all of that at his office. Of course he does. I moved to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden my husband Thomas and I had planted together. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday. But nothing would ever be the same again. Tell me something, Vanessa. How long have you been planning this? Planning what, Evelyn? You are being paranoid. I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. Paranoid. My daughter-in-law just showed my house to potential buyers without telling me. Informed me I am being shipped off to a nursing home and claims my son signed papers giving her control over my life. And I am paranoid. Not Harris, she corrected quickly. Michael and I are making these decisions together, right? Of course. I turned back to face her. And where exactly is my loving son today while you are handling the sale of his childhood home? He is at work. He has a conference call with Tokyo. That was probably true. Michael's job at Midwest Structural Engineering kept him busy, often working odd hours to accommodate international clients. It was one of the things Vanessa had used against him from the beginning, making him feel guilty about not being around enough to help with me. He feels terrible about this. Vanessa continued, apparently sensing an opening. But he knows it is necessary. You cannot live alone anymore, Evelyn. What if something happens? What if you fall, or have a medical emergency? Or leave the stove on, mysteriously, when I am not even home? Her mouth snapped shut. I had caught her. We both knew it, but instead of backing down, something calculating flickered in her eyes. I think you are more confused than we realized, she said slowly. Maybe we need to move up the timeline. A chill ran down my spine. What timeline? For your move to Maplewood residence. I was thinking next week, but maybe it should be sooner. Tomorrow even. I will call them this afternoon. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was talking about dismantling my entire life like she was rearranging furniture. You cannot do this, I whispered. I can, and I will. Vanessa stood up, smoothing her skirt. Michael trusts me to handle this situation, and that is exactly what I am going to do. Michael does not know what you are really doing. Michael knows exactly what I am doing, she said coldly. He asked me to handle it because he could not bear to do it himself. He loves you too much to be objective about your condition. My condition. As if declining mental health was a foregone conclusion instead of a fiction she had carefully constructed. Why, I asked. Why are you doing this to me? For just a moment, her mask slipped completely. The fake concern, the pretend reluctance, the manufactured sympathy, all of it vanished, leaving behind something cold and calculating. "Because I can," she said simply. And there it was, the truth underneath all the lies and manipulation. She was doing this because she could get away with it, because she had identified me as an obstacle to whatever life she wanted with my son, and she had decided to remove me. "The house will sell for at least $450,000, she continued almost conversationally. "Maybe more if we find the right buyer. That is a nice nest egg for Michael and me to start our real life together."
Our real life. You have been married for 3 years. Our real life without his mother hovering over everything.
The venom in her voice was unmistakable now.
Do you have any idea what it is like being married to a man who calls his mommy every other day? Who rushes over here every weekend to check on you? Who feels guilty every time we go on vacation because he is leaving poor Evelyn all alone?
So that was it. I was not just an inconvenience, I was competition. In Vanessa's mind, I was standing between her and complete control over my son. "Michael loves me," I said quietly. "Michael feels obligated to you. There is a difference." She picked up her purse from the counter, checking her reflection in the chrome surface of my refrigerator. "But do not worry. Once you are settled at Maplewood residence, he will visit sometimes. Holidays, probably maybe your birthday." The casual dismissal of a lifetime of love and sacrifice hit me like a slap. This woman truly believed she could erase me from my son's life as easily as she was erasing me from my home. "I will fight this," I said. "With what? You have no money of your own anymore. It is all in joint accounts with Michael. Now remember, no legal standing since you are mentally incompetent. No allies since everyone can see how confused you have become lately." She paused at the kitchen doorway, looking back at me with something that might have been pity if it were not so calculating. "Face facts, Evelyn. You have already lost." The front door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the kitchen, where I had made countless meals for my family, where I had comforted my son through broken hearts and celebrated his achievements. But as I stood there in the silence, surrounded by 40 years of memories, I realized something that Vanessa had not counted on. She was absolutely right about one thing. I had been planning, but not for a nursing home. I had been planning for her, and she had just given me everything I needed to destroy her completely. I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Detective Brooks, it is Evelyn Parker. I think it is time we had that conversation we discussed. The game was about to change, and Vanessa had no idea what was coming." Detective Brooks arrived within an hour, just as I knew he would. We had been neighbors for 15 years before his promotion moved him across town, and he had always been the kind of man who kept his word. "Evelyn," he said, settling his large frame into my husband Thomas' old recliner. "When you called 6 months ago about running background checks, I thought you might be overreacting. Now I am thinking maybe you were not." I poured him coffee in the mug I had always kept for his visits, the one with "World's Best Neighbor" that his daughter had given me one Christmas. Some traditions die hard even when the world is falling apart around you. "Tell me what you found," I said, though I already knew most of it. What I needed was confirmation, official documentation proof that would hold up when this whole mess exploded. Alan Brooks had been a detective for 23 years, and his expression told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "Your instincts were right, Evelyn. Vanessa Chen, or rather the woman calling herself Vanessa Chen, has a history." My hands were steady as I set down my coffee cup, but my heart was racing. 6 months ago, something about my new daughter-in-law had felt wrong. Not obviously wrong, not dramatically wrong, just off. Little things that did not add up.
Stories that changed slightly each time she told them. Gaps in her past that she glossed over with that bright smile. So I had done what any protective mother would do.
I had asked questions, and when the questions did not yield answers, I had called in a favor. What kind of history, I asked, though I was bracing myself for the answer. Alan pulled out a manila folder, the kind that had become all too familiar over the past months. She has done this before, Evelyn. 3 times that we can confirm, possibly more. 3 times. The number hit me like a physical blow, even though I had suspected something like this. The first was in Tucson, Arizona, about 8 years ago. Married a widower named Edward Chen. That is where she got the last name she is using now. Edward was 76, had early-stage dementia. Vanessa convinced his family that he needed full-time care, got herself appointed as his healthcare proxy, and moved him into a memory care facility. What happened to him? Died 18 months later. Natural causes, but the timing was convenient. By then, she had sold his house, liquidated his investments, and transferred most of his assets into accounts she controlled. The family tried to fight it, but the legal documentation was solid. She walked away with nearly $350,000. I felt sick. This was not just greed. This was something darker. This was a pattern, a calculated, practiced method of destroying lives. The second case was in Colorado Springs. Colorado, Alan continued. Married a man named Gregory Hale, 60 years old, recently divorced. He had an elderly mother living with him. Sound familiar? Within 6 months of the marriage, Vanessa had convinced Gregory that his mother was becoming a burden. The mother, Mrs. Lillian Hale, was moved to a care facility against her will, and Lillian died 6 months later. Heart attack brought on by stress and depression, according to the medical examiner. But here is the interesting part. Vanessa had already filed paperwork to become Lillian's guardian, claiming the woman was mentally incompetent. The parallels to my own situation were chilling. Every detail matched what Vanessa was trying to do to me, down to the claims of mental incompetence and the rush to move me out of my home. What about the third case, I asked. Alan's expression grew even grimmer. Salem, Oregon. This one is different because we have a living witness. Vanessa married Daniel Cho, 45 years old, a software engineer. His grandmother lived with them, 91 years old, sharp as a tack despite her age. Let me guess, I said. Suddenly, grandmother became a problem. Exactly, he replied. But this time, the family fought back. Daniel's sister got suspicious when Vanessa started talking about nursing homes and memory care. She hired a private investigator, discovered Vanessa's real history, and confronted her. What happened? Vanessa disappeared in the middle of the night, cleaned out the joint bank accounts, took everything of value that was not nailed down, and vanished. Daniel never saw her again, but she had already done significant financial damage. The family lost about $60,000, plus legal fees trying to track her down. I sat back in my chair, processing the magnitude of what Alan was telling me. This was not just about me. Vanessa was a predator who specialized in targeting families, with elderly members exploiting love guilt and family loyalty to get what she wanted. There is more, Alan said quietly. More, I asked, my heart sinking. We think she has been using different names, different identities. The woman your son married is Vanessa Chen. Her real name appears to be Laura Mitchell, born in Michigan, 35 years old. She has a juvenile record sealed, but I have a contact who is able to give me some details off the record. 35, I repeated. Vanessa told Michael she was 29. Just another lie in what was apparently a lifetime of deception. What kind of juvenile record, I asked. Elder abuse, Alan said grimly. When she was 17, she was caught stealing from the nursing home where she worked part-time. Not just money, she was taking medications, jewelry, anything valuable she could get her hands on. The charges were dropped when she agreed to counseling and community service, but the pattern was already there. I thought about all the times Vanessa had visited me over the past 3 years. How she had wandered through my house commenting on my antiques, my jewelry, my late husband Thomas' watch collection. I had thought she was just making conversation, showing interest in family history. Now I realized she had been cataloging assets. "Alan, there is something else you need to know," I said. "She has already started the process. She showed my house to buyers this morning. She claims Michael signed power of attorney papers and that I am going to Maplewood residence next week." His face darkened. "Have you seen these papers? No. She says Michael has them at his office." "Evelyn, listen to me very carefully," Alan said, his voice firm. "If those papers exist, and if they are legitimate, you need to act fast. Once you are moved to a care facility, especially one like Maplewood Residence, it becomes much harder to fight these things. The system is designed to protect vulnerable elderly people." He continued, "But it can also be used against them." "What do you mean?" I asked. "If Vanessa has convinced medical professionals that you are mentally incompetent, if she has documentation of concerning behaviors or incidents, a judge might uphold the guardianship. Even if you object, your objections could be seen as further evidence of your declining mental state." The trap was even more sophisticated than I had realized. Every staged incident, every manufactured emergency, every carefully documented episode had been building toward this moment when my own words would be used as evidence against me. "But we have her history now," I said. "Surely that changes things. It helps," Alan admitted, "but it is not enough. We need proof that she is actively defrauding you, not just evidence that she has done it before. We need to catch her in the act." I smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. "What if I told you I have been recording every conversation we have had for the past 3 months? Alan's eyebrows shot up. "Every conversation, every single one," I confirmed. I started wearing a small digital recorder after that incident with the stove. I wanted to document my interactions with her in case my memory was actually starting to go. I paused. Turns out, my memory is just fine. But I have hours of audio of Vanessa discussing her plans for talking about how much money the house will bring, even joking about how easy it is to manipulate Michael. "Evelyn." That Alan shook his head in amazement. "That is exactly what we need. But there is something else we should discuss. Something bigger. Bigger how?" I asked. "I did some checking on Maplewood Residence, the facility where she wants to place you," he said slowly. "They have had an unusually high number of deaths in the past 2 years. Natural causes, all of them, but the pattern is concerning. Most of the residents who died had their assets transferred to family members shortly before their deaths." A chill ran down my spine. "You think she is working with someone there?" I asked. "I think Vanessa Chen, or Laura Mitchell, or whatever her real name is, has connections we have not uncovered yet," Alan replied gravely. "And I think you stumbling onto this might have prevented something much worse than just losing your house." The weight of what he was saying settled over me like a heavy blanket. This was not just about greed or convenience. This was about something darker, more systematic. "What do we do now?" I asked. Alan leaned forward, his expression serious but determined. "Now we set a trap, and this time we make sure she cannot disappear in the middle of the night." I thought about Michael, my sweet boy, who had no idea he had married a monster. I thought about all the other families Vanessa had destroyed, all the elderly people who had died alone and forgotten because of her schemes. "Tell me what you need me to do," I said, because this was not just about saving myself anymore. This was about stopping a predator who had been hunting vulnerable families for years, and I was going to make sure her hunting days were finally over. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with the kind of clarity that comes from finally understanding the full scope of what you are fighting. Alan had left me with homework-specific things to look for, questions to ask, ways to draw Vanessa out without making her suspicious. But as I sat at my kitchen table with my morning coffee staring at the folder of documents Alan had left behind, I realized there was something we had missed. Something that had been nagging at me since yesterday's conversation. Vanessa Chen, Laura Mitchell. The woman who had married my son had been using different names, different identities. But what if she had not just been changing her name? What if she had been changing her entire legal status? I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 20 years. Donna, it is Evelyn Parker. I know it is early, but I need a favor. Donna Reynolds had been my best friend since high school, and she had spent the last 30 years working in the county clerk's office. If anyone could help me dig into marriage records across multiple states, it was Donna. Evelyn, what on earth has you calling at 6 in the morning? She asked, her voice still thick with sleep. I need you to run some marriage license searches for me. Multiple states, multiple names. It is important, Donna. More important than I can explain over the phone. There was a pause. Donna had always been able to read between the lines, even when we were teenagers. This is about that daughter-in-law of yours, is it not? The one you have been worried about? Donna asked softly. How did you? Evelyn, I have known you for 50 years. You do not ask for favors unless something is seriously wrong. What do you need me to look for? I gave her the names Alan had uncovered. Vanessa Chen and Laura Mitchell, along with the approximate dates and locations of her previous marriages. What I was hoping to find was evidence of a pattern. What I found was something much worse. Donna called me back 2 hours later, her voice tight with concern. Evelyn, you need to sit down for this. I was already sitting, but I gripped the edge of my kitchen table anyway. What did you find? Your daughter-in-law is still married. Not to Michael. To at least 2 other men, maybe more. The room seemed to tilt around me. What do you mean still married? I mean, she never divorced Daniel Cho in Oregon or Gregory Hale in Colorado. According to the records I can access, she is legally married to 3 different men in 3 different states. Bigamy. The word hit me like a thunderbolt. Not only was Vanessa a predator who targeted vulnerable families, she was also committing felony bigamy on a multi-state level. Donna, are you absolutely certain about this? I triple-checked everything she said. The marriage license between Laura Mitchell and Daniel Cho was filed in Marion County, Oregon, on March 12, 2019, no record of divorce. The marriage between Vanessa Chen and Gregory Hale was recorded in El Paso County, Colorado, on September 8, 2020, also no record of divorce. And her marriage to your son, December 3, 2023, right there in your county, which means she was already married to 2 other men when she walked down the aisle with Michael. I felt like I could not breathe. My son's marriage was invalid. Everything Vanessa had claimed about being his wife, about having legal authority to make decisions, all of it was built on a foundation of lies. There is more, Donna continued. I found another marriage record, this one going back further. Laura Mitchell married Edward Chen in Pima County, Arizona in 2014. He died in 2016. But get this, there is no record of her changing her name legally after his death. She just started using his last name. So Vanessa Chen is not even her legal name. Legally, she is still Laura Mitchell. Has been this whole time. I thanked Donna and hung up, my mind racing. This was huge, bigger than Alan and I had imagined. This was not just fraud. This was a systematic pattern of bigamy spanning multiple states for nearly a decade. But as I sat there processing this information, I realized something else. Knowledge was power, but timing was everything. If I revealed this too soon, Vanessa might disappear again, like she had in Oregon. If I waited too long, she might succeed in having me declared incompetent and committed. I needed to think strategically. The first thing I did was call Detective Alan Brooks and fill him in on what Donna had discovered. His reaction was immediate and intense. Evelyn, this changes everything, he said. Bigamy is a federal crime when it crosses state lines. We are not just talking about elder abuse anymore. We are talking about wire fraud, mail fraud, and potentially tax evasion. The FBI is going to be very interested in Laura Mitchell. But what about the immediate situation, I asked. She is still planning to move me to that nursing home. We use this to our advantage, he said. We let her think her plan is working while we build our case. How much time do we have? She said, the moving truck comes next week, I replied. But yesterday, she threatened to move up the timeline. Okay, Alan said. Here is what we are going to do. You are going to act like you are resigned to the situation. Do not fight her anymore. Do not ask questions. Let her think she has won. Meanwhile, I am going to coordinate with the FBI and the district attorney's office. We are going to set up surveillance, document everything, and when we move, we will make sure she cannot wiggle out of this. What if she tries to move me before? Then I asked. She will not, Alan said confidently. Think about it. She needs time to finalize the house sale, transfer assets, cover her tracks. Moving you too quickly would raise red flags with the nursing home, with your son, with anyone who might ask questions later. She is going to stick to her timeline because it is the safest approach. After I hung up with Alan, I sat in my kitchen for a long time thinking about my next move. I had the truth now, all of it, but the truth alone was not enough. I needed to be smarter than Vanessa had been, more careful, more strategic. That was when I remembered the safety deposit box. 25 years ago, when my husband Thomas had been diagnosed with his heart condition, we had set up a safety deposit box at Riverbend National Bank. It contained our important documents, some jewelry, and other valuables we wanted to keep secure. After he died, I had continued to pay the annual fee, but I had not been to the box in years until today. I drove to the bank, my hands steady on the wheel, despite the magnitude of what I was planning. The safety deposit box was exactly as I had left it, filled with documents and mementos from a lifetime of careful planning. But today, I was adding something new. I pulled out a small digital recorder, the same one I had been using to document my conversations with Vanessa, and set it carefully inside the box. Along with it, I placed copies of all the evidence Alan had gathered, Donna's marriage record searches, and a detailed letter explaining everything I had discovered about Laura Mitchell's criminal history. If something happened to me, if Vanessa's plan succeeded, and I ended up in Maplewood residence, unable to defend myself, this evidence would still exist. Alan knew about the safety deposit box now, and he had explicit instructions to access it if I became incapacitated. But I was not planning to become incapacitated. I was planning something much different. As I drove home, I called Michael's office. His secretary put me through immediately. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked. "Vanessa said you have been having some difficulties lately." The concern in my son's voice broke my heart. He had no idea that the woman he had married was a predator, that their entire relationship was built on lies, that she had been planning to destroy our family from the moment she walked into our lives. "I am fine, sweetheart," I said warmly. "I was just calling to see if you would like to come to dinner on Sunday. It has been too long since we had a real conversation." "That sounds great, Mom," he said. "I will check with Vanessa about our schedule." "Actually," I said carefully, "I was hoping it could just be the two of us like when you were growing up. I could make that pot roast you always loved." There was a pause. "Mom, Vanessa and I are married now. We do things together." "Of course," I said gently. "I just thought it might be nice to have some one-on-one time with my son. But if Vanessa wants to come, she is welcome. Let me talk to her and get back to you," he said finally. After I hung up, I realized I was smiling for the first time in days because I knew exactly what Vanessa's response would be. She would never allow Michael to have private conversations with me. Not now when she was so close to achieving her goal. She would find a way to be there to monitor every word to make sure I did not say anything that might undermine her carefully constructed narrative, which was exactly what I was counting on. Because Sunday dinner was going to be very interesting indeed. I was going to give Vanessa exactly what she wanted. The appearance of a confused, defeated old woman who was ready to accept her fate right up until the moment I destroyed her completely. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for her to walk into it. Sunday dinner arrived with all the anticipation of a storm about to break. I had spent 3 days preparing not just the pot roast and mashed potatoes that Michael loved, but also the careful orchestration of what would be the most important conversation of my life. They arrived at 5 o'clock sharp. Vanessa's hand was possessively wrapped around my son's arm, as if she were afraid he might escape. She was dressed casually but expensively, her blonde hair perfectly styled even for a simple family dinner. The picture of domestic perfection. "Something smells wonderful," Mom Michael said, giving me a hug that felt different somehow, more careful, more distant. I could see Vanessa's influence in the way he held himself, the slight hesitation before he embraced me. "Just your old favorite," I replied, forcing warmth into my voice. "Why do you not both sit down while I finish up in the kitchen?" As I bustled around preparing the final touches, I could hear them talking quietly in the dining room. Vanessa's voice was too low for me to make out the words, but her tone was soothing, reassuring, no doubt reinforcing whatever stories she had been telling him about my supposed declining mental state. When I carried the roast to the table, Michael jumped up to help me, his engineer's instincts kicking in. "Mom, you should have called. This looks heavy. I have been carrying roast to this table for 40 years, sweetheart," I said lightly. "I think I can manage one more." But I let him help anyway, while noting how Vanessa watched our interaction with sharp, calculating eyes. She was cataloging everything, looking for signs of the confusion and frailty she had been claiming I exhibited. The first part of dinner passed normally. We talked about Michael's work, a project he was excited about involving bridge construction in South America. I asked questions, remembered details from previous conversations, demonstrated the sharp memory that Vanessa had supposedly witnessed deteriorating. I could see her growing uncomfortable with how lucid I appeared, how engaged I was with the conversation. This was not the confused, declining woman she had been describing to my son. Mom Michael said, as I served dessert, "His favorite apple pie, Vanessa, and I wanted to talk to you about some changes we think would be good for you." Here it was. The moment I had been preparing for. "What kind of changes, dear?" I asked calmly. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression carefully composed into what she probably thought looked like loving concern. "We have been worried about you living alone in this big house," she said softly, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Evelyn," Michael said, "barely sleeps at night thinking about what could happen if you fell or had some kind of emergency." I turned to my son, letting just a hint of confusion creep into my voice. "You are worried about me." "Of course I am, Mom," he said. "You are 72 years old." 63, I corrected automatically. "Right, 62, he said quickly, a little flustered. "And this house is getting to be too much for you to maintain. Plus, there have been some incidents lately that have us concerned." "Incidents?" I asked, though I already knew what he was referring to, Vanessa's carefully manufactured evidence of my supposed decline. Vanessa pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be notes. "Well, there was the stove incident last week," she said smoothly. "I came by and found it still burning from the night before." I do not remember that I said, which was true, because it had never happened. "And the bills," Michael added gently. "You forgot to pay your electric and phone bills last month. I had to take care of them for you." Also untrue. My bills were automatically debited from my account and had been for years, but I could see how easily Vanessa had convinced him otherwise. "The thing is, Mom," Michael continued, his voice gentle but firm, "Vanessa found a really nice place where you would have people around all the time, activities, medical care if you need it. It is called Maplewood Residence." "A nursing home?" I asked softly, letting my voice quaver just slightly. "An assisted living facility," Vanessa corrected quickly. "Very nice, very comfortable." You would have your own room meals provided housekeeping. No more worrying about maintenance or bills or any of that stressful stuff. But this is my home, I said, looking around the dining room where we had celebrated so many milestones. Your father and I bought this house when you were just a baby, Michael. All our memories are here. I know, Mom, he said, his expression softening. And we are not talking about getting rid of anything important. We will keep all the family photos, the special pieces, but the house itself, it is just too much. We have already had it appraised, Vanessa added, smiling sweetly. It should sell for around $450,000, maybe more. That money can go into an account for your care to make sure you are comfortable for the rest of your life. An account she would control, no doubt, just like she had done with her previous victims. Have you found buyers already? I asked innocently. Vanessa and Michael exchanged a look. Actually, Vanessa said we have had some interest. There is a couple who looked at it earlier this week. They seemed very excited about it. The Harrisons, the couple she had brought through my house while I was out. The ones who had talked about tearing down walls and modernizing everything. That was fast, I observed. Well, it is a seller's market right now, Vanessa said smoothly. Good houses go quickly. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. And when would this all happen? Soon, Michael said. We have already put a deposit down at Maplewood Residence. They have a room available, and honestly, Mom, the waiting list is usually pretty long. We were lucky to get you in. Lucky. Or Vanessa had connections there, just like Alan suspected. I see, I said quietly. And I suppose you have already made all the arrangements. We have handled the paperwork, Vanessa said quickly. Michael has power of attorney now, so he can take care of all the legal details. You do not have to worry about any of that complicated stuff. Power of attorney. The documents I had never signed. The authority I had never granted. Could I see these papers? I asked evenly. I would like to understand what I am agreeing to. Another exchange of looks between them. Mom, Michael said gently, the important thing is that you trust us to take care of you. The legal details are, well, they are pretty boring. Lots of lawyer language. But surely I should know what rights I am signing away, I said softly. You are not signing away any rights, Vanessa said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. We are just making sure you are protected and cared for. I stood up slowly, as if the weight of their words was too much for me to bear sitting down. This is a lot to process, I said. I think I need some air. I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden my husband Thomas and I had planted together. Behind me, I could hear Michael and Vanessa talking in low voices. She is taking it better than I expected, Vanessa was saying. She seems more confused than usual tonight, Michael replied. Maybe you are right about the timeline. When I turned back to them, I was holding my phone. There is something I need to tell you both, I said. What is it? Mom, Michael asked. I hit the play button on my voice recorder app. Vanessa's voice filled the dining room crystal clear and unmistakably cruel. Because I can. The house will sell for at least $450,000, maybe more if we find the right buyer. That is a nice nest egg for Michael and me to start our real life together. Our real life without his mother hovering over everything. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Michael looked confused, then shocked as he recognized his wife's voice. What is this? Vanessa demanded. This is you 3 days ago, explaining to me why you are destroying my life, I said calmly. Would you like to hear more? I have hours of recordings. I hit play again. This time, it was Vanessa's voice saying, Face facts, Evelyn. You have already lost. You have no money of your own anymore. No legal standing. No allies. Michael was staring at his wife like he had never seen her before. Vanessa, what is she talking about? He asked, his voice cracking. It is taken out of context, Vanessa said quickly. She is confused, Michael. This is exactly what we have been talking about. She is paranoid, recording conversations, making up stories. Making up stories. I repeated, my tone icy. I reached into the drawer of my china cabinet and pulled out the folder Alan had given me. Like the story about your real name being Laura Mitchell? I asked evenly. Or the story about your previous marriages to Daniel Cho Gregory Hale and Edward Chen? Now Vanessa looked genuinely terrified. I do not know what you are talking about. I am talking about the fact that you are still married to at least 2 other men, I said coldly, which makes your marriage to my son invalid. I am talking about the fact that you have done this exact same thing to 3 other families. I am talking about the fact that Laura Mitchell is a predator who specializes in targeting elderly family members. Michael was looking back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match, trying to process what he was hearing. This is insane, Vanessa said, standing up so quickly that her chair toppled over. Michael, she is having some kind of psychotic break. We need to call someone. Sit down, I said quietly, but there was something in my voice that made her freeze. We are not done. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before Detective Alan Brooks answered. Detective Brooks, I said steadily. It is time. Within 10 minutes, my dining room was full of law enforcement officers, Detective Brooks, 2 FBI agents, and a representative from the district attorney's office. They had been waiting for my call, positioned nearby in case Vanessa tried to run. Laura Mitchell, one of the FBI agents, said firmly, "You are under arrest for bigamy, wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." As they read her rights, Vanessa looked at me with pure hatred. You think you have won? She hissed. But you have just destroyed your relationship with your son forever. I looked at Michael, who was sitting in stunned silence as his world collapsed around him. Maybe, I said softly, but at least he will be alive to hate me. Which is more than I can say for Edward Chen, Gregory Hale, and Lillian Hale. As they led Vanessa away in handcuffs, she was still screaming about how it was all a misunderstanding, how I was a confused old woman who did not know what she was talking about. But the evidence spoke for itself. And for the first time in months, my home was truly mine again. The silence after the FBI agents left was deafening. Michael sat at my dining room table staring at the spot where his wife had been sitting just 20 minutes earlier, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. She has been lying to me for 3 years, he said, finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I know, sweetheart. I sat down beside him, resisting the urge to reach out and comfort him the way I had when he was a child. This was different. This was a grown man confronting the fact that his entire marriage had been built on deception. The power of attorney papers, he said, suddenly looking up at me with haunted eyes. I never signed any power of attorney papers, Mom. She kept saying we needed to get them done, but every time we made an appointment with a lawyer, something would come up. She would reschedule or say we should wait until after her next doctor's appointment, or she would manufacture some crisis that required your immediate attention. I finished for him. Like the stove incident. He nodded slowly. The stove incident, he said. When she called me at work, hysterical, saying she had found the house filled with gas and you were nowhere to be found. I rushed over here, but you were just at your book club meeting, which I told her about 3 days earlier. I said softly. She knew exactly where I was. And the bills? Michael continued, his voice tight. She showed me notices from the electric company, said you were getting confused about payments. I offered to set up automatic payments for you, but she said it would be better if I just handled everything myself. The pieces were falling into place for him now, the carefully constructed web of lies that Vanessa had spun around both of us. I could see the anger building behind his eyes, replacing the shock. How long have you known? He asked. I started suspecting something 6 months ago, I said. Nothing dramatic, just little things that did not add up. Her stories about her past changed depending on who she was talking to. She claimed to be an only child, but let slip once about a sister. Said she had never been married before, but had a tan line where a wedding ring used to be. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked quietly. It was the question I had been dreading, but also the one I had prepared for. "Because I knew you would not believe me," I said. "You were in love with her, at least with the person you thought she was. If I had come to you with suspicions and accusations, what would you have done?" He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him thinking back over the past 3 years, reevaluating every interaction through this new lens. "I would have thought you were jealous," he admitted finally. "I would have thought you could not accept that I was married and did not need you anymore." Exactly. So I continued. I did what any mother would do. I investigated, quietly gathered evidence, and waited for the right moment to act. "You could have been killed," Michael said suddenly, the full implications hitting him. "If she has done this before, if people have died, but I was not killed, and now she cannot hurt anyone else." Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Vanessa's crimes began to emerge. The FBI's investigation revealed that her real name was indeed Laura Mitchell, and that she had been running variations of the same con for over a decade. There were more victims than even Alan Brooks had initially discovered. Elderly people who had died under suspicious circumstances, families who had been financially devastated, adult children who had been manipulated into betraying their own parents. Maplewood Residence, the facility where Vanessa had planned to place me, was shut down pending investigation. The FBI had found evidence of systematic abuse and financial exploitation of residents, with Vanessa as a key coordinator in the scheme. The thought of how close I had come to ending up there still made my blood run cold. Michael threw himself into helping with the investigation, providing financial records and communications that helped establish the pattern of Vanessa's fraud. I think it was his way of processing the betrayal, of trying to make amends for the role he had unknowingly played in her plan. I transferred $18,000 to her personal account last month, he told me one evening as we sat in my living room going through bank statements. She said it was for a down payment on a vacation home she wanted to surprise me with. That money probably went to pay off debts from her previous scams, I said gently. None of this is your fault, Michael. She is a professional manipulator. This is what she does. But I could see the guilt eating at him. The knowledge that he had been prepared to commit his own mother to a facility where she might have died alone and forgotten. 3 months after Vanessa's arrest, we were both called to testify at her trial. The courtroom was packed with victims and their families, people who had traveled from across the country to see justice served. When it was my turn to take the stand, I looked directly at Vanessa as I spoke. She was thinner than before, her perfect blonde hair dulled by months in jail, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. But her eyes still held that calculating coldness I had learned to recognize. She told me I had already lost. I said, repeating her words from that day in my kitchen. She said I had no money, no legal standing, no allies. She thought she had isolated me completely. But that was not true, was it? The prosecutor asked. No, I said, smiling for the first time since I had entered the courtroom. What she did not understand was that I had something she had never had and never would have. What was that? People who genuinely loved me. Detective Alan Brooks, who went above and beyond to help a neighbor in trouble. My friend Donna Reynolds, who spent hours searching records to uncover the truth. My son, who once he understood what was really happening, stood by me completely. I paused, looking at Michael in the gallery. Laura Mitchell had spent her life using people and throwing them away. She could not comprehend that some relationships are built on something stronger than what you can take from each other. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 30 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 20 years. As the bailiff led her away, Vanessa turned to look at me one last time. I thought she might try to say something to get in one final cruel word. Instead, she just looked defeated. For the first time since I had known her, she looked like what she really was. A sad, empty person who had built her entire life on destroying others. The drive home from the courthouse was quiet. Michael had offered to take me to dinner to celebrate, but I declined. What I wanted was to go home to my house, to the space that was truly mine again. "Mom," Michael said as we pulled into my driveway, "I know I have a lot to make up for. I know saying I am sorry is not enough." "You do not have anything to make up for," I said firmly. "You were the victim here too. She manipulated you just as much as she tried to manipulate me. But I was ready to put you in that place. I was ready to sell your house to take away everything that mattered to you. But you did not," I pointed out. "When you learned the truth, you stood by me. That is what matters." He walked me to the door, and I could see him looking around the house with new eyes. The home he had been prepared to sell was still here, still filled with 40 years of family memories. "Can I ask you something?" he said as I unlocked the front door. "Of course. How did you know, I mean really, no, not just suspect. How did you know she was lying about everything?" I thought about it for a moment, trying to put into words something that had been more instinct than logic. "She never asked about your father," I said finally. "What do you mean?" "In 3 years of marriage, she never once asked me about your father. She never wanted to hear stories about your childhood, about what you were like as a little boy, about the man who helped raise you. Someone who truly loves you would want to know those things. Someone who was just using you would not care." Michael nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Besides," I added with a smile, "she made one critical mistake." "What was that?" "She underestimated a mother's love, and she underestimated me." 6 months later, I was hosting Sunday dinner again. Not just for Michael, but for Detective Alan Brooks and his wife, for Donna Reynolds and her husband, and for the neighbors who had rallied around me during the trial. My dining room was full of laughter and conversation, the kind of warm, genuine connection that Vanessa had never understood and never would. As I looked around the table at these people who had stood by me, who had helped me fight for my life and my home, I realized something profound. Vanessa had been right about one thing. I had lost something during this ordeal. I had lost my naivety. I had lost the assumption that family members always have your best interests at heart. I had lost the belief that evil always announces itself dramatically. But what I had gained was so much more valuable. I had gained the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. I had gained a deeper appreciation for the people who truly loved me. And I had gained the satisfaction of knowing that a predator who had hurt countless families would never hurt anyone again. At 63, I was starting a new chapter of my life. Not in a nursing home, not as someone's victim, but as a woman who had fought for what mattered and won. The house that had kept secrets had finally revealed them all, and in doing so, it had set us all free. Now I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. Meanwhile, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.